Greetings and peace be with you. My name is Dr. Zachary Markwith, Deputy Director of the Intercultural Networks Group, or ING. I'm delighted to welcome you today as we launch our new Civic Pluralism Speakers Bureau and introduce the first group of speakers, all of whom are Interfaith America Civic Pluralism Fellows. Alongside our Islamic Speakers Bureau, Interfaith Speakers Bureau, and Intercultural Speakers Bureau, this new bureau is dedicated to strengthening civic understanding, constitutional literacy, democratic participation, and America's enduring tradition of pluralism. And what better time to launch this initiative than during the celebration of America's 250th anniversary? Joining us today are 5 distinguished Interfaith America Civic Pluralism Fellows. Can you please turn your cameras on now? I'm pleased to introduce Rory Picker-Neese, Senior Vice President at Jewish Council for Public Affairs, Nap Nasworth, Executive Director at American Values Coalition, Maha El-Junaidi, Executive Director of the Intercultural Networks Group, the organization bringing you today's panel, Jake Villa, Organizing Director at American Humanist Association, and Suhag Shukla, Executive Director at Hindu American Foundation. You can find each of the speakers' full bios in the description below this YouTube video. Today's conversation is titled American Pluralism in Practice: How Diverse Communities Strengthen Our Democracy. Each panelist will respond to a series of questions exploring how people of different faiths and worldviews can strengthen our civic life while honoring our shared constitutional values. At the conclusion of the panel, I'll also share how you can request a Civic Pluralism Speakers Bureau presentation or panel discussion for your school, workplace, community, or organization. Thank you so much for joining us. Now let's get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to call on you based on the alphabetical order of your first name. My first question is, and let's turn to Jake to begin. What does American pluralism ask of each of us?
Yeah, I think it asks each of us to grant each other the same freedom of conscience that we want for ourselves, the freedom to think, to reason, and to choose our own beliefs without governmental influence.
Thank you. Now turning to Maha.
So American pluralism asks each of us to protect one another's equal dignity, rights, and freedoms, especially when we disagree, because our democracy is strongest when every person has the opportunity to belong, to contribute, and to flourish.
Great. Nap, we'd love to hear from you.
American pluralism asks us to treat the rights of our neighbors, especially those neighbors we disagree with the most, as seriously as we treat our own rights.
And Rory.
American pluralism asks us to recognize that our democracy is strongest when we don't just tolerate each other's differences, but we see every person's dignity and voice as essential to the shared story we're building together.
Great. Thank you. And Suhag.
American pluralism asks each of us to hold our own perspectives and ideas with integrity while remaining genuinely curious and not threatened by the perspectives and ideas of others.
Thank you all. So my next question, what's one word or value from your tradition that you think strengthens democracy? In the same order, let's start with Jake.
Conscience.
Maha? You're on mute, Maha.
Compassion, especially in how we treat one another.
Nap?
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Great. Rory?
Machloket l'shem shamayim, which translates to arguments for the sake of heaven.
And Suhag?
Samadrishti, which means equal vision and equal regard.
Great. Wonderful. And I'm going to ask each of you to please finish this sentence. Pluralism works when? Jake?
Pluralism works when we stop demanding agreement and start protecting each other's right to disagree.
Maha?
When we choose curiosity over fear, when we protect one another's equal dignity and freedoms, when we recognize that our differences are not obstacles to democracy, they are among its greatest strengths.
Nap?
Pluralism works when we choose to defend the rights of those we disagree with the most, not just the rights of our own community.
And Rory?
Pluralism works when we're willing to stay in relationship across difference, when we can disagree deeply while still choosing curiosity, respect, and shared responsibility.
And Suhag, please.
Pluralism works when we cultivate samadrishti, which is an unwavering capacity to see every individual as equally worthy and act on that vision steadily and without exception.
I appreciate all of these answers. I'm now going to invite only two speakers to please respond to the following question. Tell us about one moment your community worked alongside people of very different beliefs, what made it succeed, and what almost broke it. Let's start with Maha.
Thank you. So I have 2 minutes to respond to this question. So one experience stands out from our work at ING. So as Muslims, we often encounter situations where Islamophobia is not expressed out of overt hatred, but because people sincerely believe misinformation about Islam to be factual. And that was the case with a religious community that we had partnered with. This is early on in my career as a nonprofit manager. And this particular community was inviting speakers whom many Muslims viewed as promoting inaccurate and harmful portrayals of Islam and Muslims. Rather than ending the relationship, which actually many of my colleagues in the Muslim community wanted to do, at ING, we chose to engage. And over a period of months, we had honest, respectful conversations about why these speakers were so damaging, not because they held different political views, but because they presented misinformation that fueled prejudice against an entire faith community. We listened to their concerns, we answered difficult questions, and over time we built trust before asking them to reconsider their decisions about the speakers that they were inviting. The conversations worked. They not only stopped co-sponsoring events featuring those speakers, but they also encouraged other organizations within their religious community to rethink similar invitations. And that change came not through public pressure or condemnation, but through relationships, patience, and a willingness to keep talking. What made it succeed was mutual respect and the belief that people can change when they're given the opportunity to understand another perspective. Ironically, nothing actually nearly broke that particular relationship. However, I've attempted similar conversations with 2 other religious groups where the outcome was very different. And what prevented progress was not disagreement, it was an unwillingness to continue the conversation. When people become convinced that they have nothing left to learn from one another, dialogue ends, trust erodes, and pluralism becomes much harder to sustain. Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you. Jake, I'd now like to turn to you with the same question.
Yeah, so a moment that my community worked alongside others. First off, we do a lot of this in our political work and our policy work to maintain separation of church and state, which we think is really important. On a more local level, one of our groups in Michigan Humanists, they've been part of a local interfaith institute in the Grand Rapids area for over 20 years now. They built habitat houses with their interfaith friends, they've planned interfaith Thanksgivings, and they've stood with their faith communities to support families losing SNAP benefits. But one of their most meaningful interactions came through working with local hospice units. So around the greater Grand Rapids area, there's about 10 area hospices who are in competition with each other, and many of them are religious organizations. But one leader from the local interfaith council pulled them together and put them in front of a panel of non-religious people so they could hear how secular people, like myself, want to be treated at the end of our lives. Top leaders from every local area hospice was in that room. They told them what it's like to face the worst moment of your life and have someone press a religious belief on you that's not something you identify with and ever have, when it's the very last thing you need or want at that critical moment when you're facing the end. Those hospice leaders, they didn't get defensive though. They authentically asked, what words help you? How can we be better? And they took it back to their organizations. Hearing those caregivers change their language in later conversations made a huge difference to the people that they were serving at the end of their time on this planet. And I think that's pluralism. It's not about agreement, but it's about being heard and making space to meet each other where we want to be met.
Great, thank you. I'm now going to invite the three remaining speakers to answer the next question. Many assume diversity divides a democracy. Make the opposite case. How does difference actually make us stronger? Let's start with Suhag, please.
That's a great question. There's a line in the Vedas, the oldest Hindu sacred source of knowledge, that's my internal compass, and that is Ekam Sat Vipraha Bahuda Vadanti. The truth is one, the wise speak of it in many ways. And to me, this isn't just a spiritual teaching, but it's a lesson for democracy. We're told again and again that difference is a problem to be managed, a tension to be resolved. But the Hindu tradition has always understood something different, that the many are not fragments of a broken whole. They're expressions of a single underlying reality. So each worldview, each voice, each way of seeing carries something that the others don't. And it's precisely in that plurality that wisdom becomes complete. So when we think about democracy, what does it actually ask of us? It asks us to govern ourselves together across difference and not despite it. And that only works if we believe that every voice adds something. And so that the fullness of truth about who we are, what we need, where we're going, can't be spoken by just any one of us alone. We have to do it together. The Hindu sages knew this, and they approached truth through many different paths, through knowledge, through devotion, through action. And all of these paths were enriched by one another. They weren't divided by one another. So I feel that when someone tells me that diversity weakens democracy, I remember that our differences are not what stands between us and a more perfect union, but it's how we build one.
Great. Rory, the same question for you, please.
I think one of the greatest misunderstandings about democracy is the idea that unity somehow means sameness. It doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
A healthy democracy is not one where everyone thinks alike. It's one where people with different experiences, beliefs, and identities can come together and build something larger than any of us could create alone. From my own tradition, we have a long history of wrestling with disagreement. Jewish texts preserve arguments between rabbis, not because the disagreements are a sign of failure in any way, but because we recognize that the process of listening, of challenging, of learning from one another is a path to wisdom. The goal was never to eliminate difference. It's to engage difference responsibly. Our communities are stronger when people bring different perspectives to the table. Difference helps us notice what we might miss, question assumptions we might otherwise never examine, and create solutions that actually reflect the complexity of the world we share. The challenge is that difference requires work. It requires humility. It requires us to move beyond the instinct to categorize people as us and them. But that work is also where democracy lives. Democracy is not the absence of conflict. It's the practice of navigating conflict without losing our commitment to one another. Pluralism gives us a way to hold both truths at once. We can have real disagreements and still have a shared future. And in fact, the strength of democracy depends on our ability to do exactly that.
Nap, the same question, please.
Yeah, I love this question because this is something our founders dealt with as well. And James Madison himself, really put an emphasis on the importance of diversity for a strong democracy. He said that when you have a diversity of groups, or what Madison called factions, that makes democracy stronger, not weaker. And it's stronger because you don't have a single faction that imposes its will on the minority of the group. So we actually benefit from having lots and lots of diversity. It makes our democracy stronger. It's essential for a strong democracy to have diversity. It's the primary safeguard for democracy. And so it's difficult. Sure, it's difficult to be in a community with lots of diversity, but I would just remind everyone that difficult things is what makes us stronger. It's not doing easy things that makes us stronger. It's doing the difficult things that makes us stronger. So I just think in terms as well as my own evangelical faith, we can take this a step further. And we all benefit from having diverse relationships. Evangelicals very, we proselytize, so we're very outward looking and want to build relationships with others. So we all benefit from having these diverse relationships because those diverse relationships help us see our own blind spots. And so diversity itself is not just a safeguard for democracy, it's a resource for us individually. It's a resource for us that we can use when we build relationships across these differences.
Thank you all for sharing your insights and experiences. For the final question, I'll reverse the order of speakers, so we'll start with Suhag. For the leaders, educators, and organizers watching this, what's one concrete thing they can immediately do to strengthen pluralism where they work?
So I'd say in your day-to-day interactions with your colleagues, especially those with whom you believe you disagree with, whether it's personally, politically, theologically, or any other way, try to observe what's actually being communicated or happening during an exchange rather than allowing generalizations and presumptions to cloud things. This practice doesn't necessarily lead to agreement, but it does lead to understanding, which strengthens pluralism and our ability to thrive, not only on the basis of what we share, but where we fundamentally differ.
Thank you. Now I'm pleased to turn back to Rory.
Great opportunities for people to be in genuine relationship across difference. Don't just have the conversations about issues, but create spaces where people can share stories, life experiences, talk about their values. Trust is the foundation of pluralism. It's what brought us all here together today. And trust is built when we encounter one another as human beings before we encounter one another as opinions.
Thank you. And back to Nap.
Yeah, workplaces are a great opportunity to model pluralism. So here's just one concrete thing you can do. Just pick one project. Find one difference in your community, one cross-difference relationship. Reach out to that person and work on a project together. Find something where you find common ground and that's something that you can do together. And then in that way, you're modeling pluralism for the rest of the community.
And Maha.
I'm just loving the fact that we all have different answers. I chose investing in religious literacy, right? You can't build an inclusive workplace, an inclusive school environment, an inclusive community if people don't understand the beliefs, the histories, the lived experiences of their neighbors. So make it a priority to create opportunities for people of different backgrounds to learn from, not just about one another. Because knowledge replaces stereotypes, relationships build trust, and trust is really the foundation of pluralism.
And Jake, you have the last word among the panelists.
In 1963, JFK said, if we cannot now end our differences, at least we can make the world safe for diversity. So we do that by looking at our next meeting, our next service project, our next event, and asking, who's missing? Who should be here that isn't? Who can we work with? Then go invite that person, that movement, or that belief system, not just to observe, but to own a piece of the work. Belonging isn't about talking about inclusion. It's built the moment you hand somebody different from you real responsibility and trust them with it.
Wonderful. Thank you to our outstanding panelists for sharing your insights, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. If you'd like to bring a civic pluralism panel or presentation to your organization, company, school, or community group, we'd love to hear from you. Please contact me at mail@ing.org. To learn more about the Civic Pluralism Speakers Bureau and our other speakers bureaus, visit ing.org. Throughout the year, we'll be announcing new speakers, panel discussions, and educational programs designed to strengthen civic understanding, constitutional literacy, and America's tradition of pluralism. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to continuing the conversation.